Thank you for your observations and sharing your views. Um, I just want to add that some of my colleagues are, since I have been attached with the Wildlife Institute of India, and there we were having a project on the conservation of dugongs. One of the sites was in Gulf of Mannar, and presently some of my colleagues, they are quite intensively working in together with the fishermen, trying to have discussions or uh, influence or convince them to at least if in their bycatch they have a dugong, then let it go. Don't uh, kill it or keep it for consumption. I think this is a very important point that you have brought up, because as wildlife conservationists, we often give recommendations in our reports to the government to implement rules so that there is some sort of restriction in the resource extraction, or to the limit. For example, seasonality, like for a particular season, fishing should not be allowed. So really finding a balance, as field researchers also, we also find that because in the field when we interact with the community, and so we also find it a very difficult thing to find a balance, that how to keep the conservation goal also intact while also keeping the interest of the community intact. Secondly, you mentioned about the prawns and the aquaculture. So my PhD I have was doing in the Kakinada area in Andhra Pradesh, near the Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary. So there I have seen
Priyamvada,
aquaculture.
there is some cracks in the voice. If you can fix that, like that will be much better.
I don't know what to.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's possible, then it. Otherwise, you are. I mean, audible, but there was some cracks. That's what.
Okay, maybe due to the network or something. Yeah, so I was just saying about aquaculture has been a problem in Kakinada and Koringa wildlife area as well, because all the agricultural lands are now being reclaimed. Even the mangroves which lie outside of the protected area, even they get converted to aquaculture ponds. So and of course it's because of export demand. So I related with these points specifically because I have been in these field areas. So I think now there are questions, two questions from Mr. Ojit. So maybe if you unmute him, he can ask the question.
Ojit, please come and unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for a very insightful and brilliant discussion. And even though we both the discussion and this, I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. So even though the geographies are so widely dispersed, or is one is in South India and what is in the eastern corner of India, but the problem here is overlapping to a great extent. So both the speakers have said that in the Loktak Lake, we have the story of Khamba and Thoibi. People have been living in this particular this waterscape for so many years. And it is one of the marker of the identity of the certain community also. And there in this southern part of India, in Tamil Nadu, I think the speaker has already preempted about the importance of the Sangam literature. And I do not know about the Sangam literature, but I am a lover of literature, have read some of the Sangam, what to say, based writing of Ramanujan. And it's so interesting to know that many of the seascape and many of these water bodies have been used extensively by the people, economically so important that the footprint is seen in the trading, what is the relationship that it was there during the with the Greeks and India and so on and so forth. So my question, the first question uh, is based on Loktak. The speaker was talking about Athapum. I also heard a lot about it. can I imagine that Adhapum is a semi-domesticated fish tank or something like an open fish farm? We happen to hear about aquaculture and open fish farm in the coastal areas of Andhra Pradesh and others. Is it somewhat similar with the Adhapum? And the second one is we talk about the speaker was talking about invasive species, and he showed us the picture of carps and and many other fishes. Uh, is are these particular fish not competing with the indigenous variety? If it is so, do you have some data on it? And the last question is there any policy or the program to mainstream the indigenous variety? Because I also come from Manipur, and we have a lot of celebrations throughout the year, and where the fish is commonly used. So if the government comes out, and you being a journalist and a media person and also an activist, uh, is there any policy program? Is there any movement so that such kind of celebrations, such kind of community practices mainstream our indigenous variety? I think if we could also start mainstreaming the indigenous variety, then the interest for breeding, interest for protection of the indigenous variety will surely increase. That's my, because in the wedding or in any kind of celebration we happen to use fish, and when I grew up, I tasted more of this invasive species and less of the indigenous variety. So can we also do some kind of, what to say, mainstreaming the indigenous variety, or do you have? That is the second question to the first speaker. And my last question to Manimohan sir is, it's really a beautiful incident in the history, finding the fishing communities using certain seascape and managing so sustainably as mentioned in the Sangam literature. So are these modern aquaculture keeping space for the locals to grow? Or is it putting it under the carpet of the trawlers, or is being strangled by the what's the trawling giants? So this is my my last question to Manimohan. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit. Now, although we are not many in this webinar, but I think the discussion is important in many aspects. One thing when you're talking about conservation, as I think Priyamvada will also agree, conservation is a very tricky terminology. Conservation, when you're talking about conservation, a lot of problems like Manimohan sir was also talking. Sometimes in the name of conservation, local people are locked out from the indigenous territory. But now currently in the UN forum, some of the discussion I'm also attending, the discussion revolves on not kicking out the local people. Conservation should be a strategy where indigenous community, people who have lived along inside forests and who have lived near wetlands, they should be a part of the conservation. So like Manimohan, you were all talking about Gulf of Manila. So even in Northeast, there has been examples where in the name of conservation, people have been dislocated. So our new concept of conservation, where we are saying that when you are talking about conservation, it's not about protecting a forest belt and you are kicking out the people who were originally there. So you cannot do that. Conservation has to be defined in a new perspective. So people, ethnic tribes or Adivasis living inside the forest, which is going to be conserved, they should be made part of the conservation program. In the name of conservation, you don't kick out 1 or 2 villages from the place. So when you try to do that, then conflict is happening. So in Northeast, when you talk about Dapur bill in Assam or Loktak like in Manipur, when government start talking about conservation, then the first thing coming out is people who are living inside these wetlands. They are classified first as occupier, then they have been classified as encroachers. And it says that law says that occupiers and encroachers should be kicked out from the conservation area. So in many discussions and debates with government of Manipur, where I have attended meetings of the government of Manipur, my argument is that conservation in the new terminology should be a strategy, a program where local community is very much part of the conservation strategy and action plan. They should not be like a group of aliens who have just come in and trying to destroy. Like in one of my slides, I saw that local fishermen are also trying to help out with problems of extensive with invasive species of weeds coming into the lake and by clearing out and all. These traditional fishermen in Loktak, they know how to cut up this biomass piece by piece, and they drag this biomass with this dugout canoe right up to a channel which flows out from Loktak to the Manipur River. And from the Manipur River, this cut pieces of biomass, it floats down to Chinwin Irrawaddy and down to Bay of Bengal. So I'm telling government Manipur that instead of buying very heavy, expensive machinery to cut up the weeds and drains the lake and all, why don't you use these traditional techniques of clearing up the floating biomass? So let the fishermen community be also part of the conservation strategy. That is one issue. So Ojit was talking about this Atafum culture. I can say that Atafum is not a very old practice. It's not very new also, but it happened around some 30, 40 years back. Basically, what happened was that with the coming of this Loktak hydroelectric power project, when this Itaiberes was constructed and it was commissioned, suddenly you find that there's a vast water spread, and all in my first slide I saw Loktak as a vast water spread, but in pre-Itaiberes era, this water spread was constituted of several smaller wetlands. When I saw a picture of Loktak today, you see a vast water spread. But before 1980, if I show you a picture of Loktak is just a smaller lake. And there's another wetland just north of the Loktak. We call it Bihari Park. Then there's another wetland called Ngakra Park. Now all these different wetlands have come under into one single water body. After the barriers came up and a certain high water level was maintained for the Loktak hydroelectric power project. So about 10 to 20 smaller wetlands have all merged into one whole water body. That what we call Loktak as such. But the original Loktak in pre-hydel era was a smaller lake. And what happened was in pre-Itaiberes area, many of this portion of the lake, which we now see as water body, were actually paddylands. Because in the lean season, level of water went down, and people, local people, practice wet rice cultivation for some temporary 3-4 months during the lean season. And when the monsoon comes in from May, the middle of May, or pre-monsoon and monsoon starts. So when monsoon comes, all these paddylands are flooded. They become water body. Then by October, after monsoon, level of the water goes down. Then these people come in and they start practicing the wet rice cultivation. There were, in pre-Itaiberes area, there were some 2 or 3 variety of wild rice. One is called Wainuchara, and another local school is Taungtabi. So local people used to harvest this wet rice cultivation, this wild rice variety during these few lean periods, starting from October up to March, April. So the fluctuation of the water level was utilized by the people for different activities. When the monsoon was there, they did fishery. And in the lean season, they practice wet rice cultivation and this winter crops and all. So this whole scenario change of the Ithai virus and these several different wetlands became one whole water body. And so when this farmers in the lake periphery began to lose their agricultural lands because the hydro project had submerged everything. So they have no option other than to turn entirely to fishery. So some of the fishing community which we see inside the lake and in the periphery of the lake, where once upon a time they were farmers, petty cultivators and all. So after the wetlands became so this excellent. So after this farmland became water body, this practice of atafum slowly came in. Like Ojit is saying, it's a form of an open fishery, something like of not culture fishery, but like something like of a capture fishery, because that atafum is just a collection of a strip of biomass put in a circle. Underneath it is nothing is there. It's just floating on the water body. So the this technique has developed, I think, around after the Baras came in. So after 1980, when the people started losing their agricultural land, they started trying to think of different techniques to fish. So in some portion of the lake, when you go today, people will point out that this much of now they'll say this much of water body was my land, my petty land. So with the petty land gone, now they have turned to fishery, and this atafum culture happened in areas where the original farmlands were there. So most of this atafum culture, now it has proliferated all over the water body. Earlier it was limited to the lake shore, quite close to the lake side. So they devise ways how to cultivate the fish. They just bring the floating biomass in a circle, then they provide fish feed inside the circle, rice hucks and all those oil seeds. And so when they see that fish are accumulating in the circle, within the circle, then they drop nets all around and all. Then responding to the second question, yes, it's very much evident that introduction of exotic species have practically overrun the indigenous species, because like bigger fishes like carps coming in, roes and grass carps coming in, they have edged out the local varieties, smaller fishes. The bigger variety of fishes were those migratory species coming up from Chinwin Irrawaddy, but this has been blocked by the Ithai Baras. So now the type of indigenous fishes you find in the Loktak lakes are these smaller species like Puntias and all. So when you catch a big fish, a big grass carp or a common carp, and when you cut up, you'll find that in the stomach and all, you find all the fish, small fingerlings and all. So they consume not only planktons and all, the smaller fishes and all, fingerlings and all. So there's a competition, definitely there's a competition between the introduced species and the native species. And in field, you see that introduced species are winning over. That's the thing happening right now. But a recent phenomena that has been happening since the last 3 to 4 years is that when government of Manipur started evicting these fishermen, and when they started removing this Athapum culture, government of Manipur said that this Athapum culture is detrimental to the health of the lake ecosystem. So they started physically removing this Athapum using this water master and dredgers and all. So then suddenly fisher community found that in the absence of this Athapums, this thicker floating biomass of weeds and other aquatic plants, then suddenly they are finding that they're not catching the bigger fish in the middle portion of the lake. Then we tried to reason why, what is happening, but then we found that these fishes are migrating to the lake shore. People are catching the bigger fish in the lake shore, not in the middle of the lake. In the middle of the lake, fishes are catching only these smaller fishes. Then another problem is with this, there's a project canal where water is drained out from the lake to the Loktak hydroelectric power project. This water is pumped out from the lake over to the Loktak hydroelectric project. Then we found out that bigger fishes are being drained out through this project canal. When the water is being pumped up, all the fishes are drained out through this tunnel. So on the other side of the hydro power project, you find that fishes are chopped up by the turbines, and all the dead fishes are floating out beyond the hydro projects. So this fishermen community are having a lot of problems in Loktak Lake. When you talk about pollution, eutrophication, nutrient investment happening, loss of vegetation, fish population reducing, then whatever fish is there is being drained out through the project canal. So the population of fish now in the lake area is very much reduced, and that's why the fishery department, they're trying to introduce fish fingerlings every year, but that is also not solving the problem, because fishermen they have to catch some fish to earn for themselves, and when they are not finding bigger fish in the middle portion of the lake, they are also resorting to catching these fingerlings. That is a problem, and we are asking them not to catch the fingerlings. And with this union, this fishermen union we have formed in 2011, we are trying to have this close season in May, June, July, when this is the spawning period. So we are asking the fishermen people not to catch the fingerlings in this close season during May, June, July. So let the fish propagate and people get them. So problems are there. And lastly, when you are talking, are there efficient policies in hand? There are policies in paper.
Would you just like a little brief, because time is approaching now? We have to...
Yeah. No, it's my last response. I'm ending. Just 1 minute. I'm ending. So when Ajit is asking where there are efficient policies, there are a lot of policies in paper, but in field, I'm in the field most of the time. I'm in the lake area most of the time. In field, you don't see these policies taking into effect. That is the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Salam sir. I think Ojit had another question for Manimohan sir. Manimohan sir, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm hearing.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
I would request that please answer in brief, and then maybe you both can have a discussion later on also.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I'm glad to hear from Ajit sir about his reading of Sangam literature through A.K. Ramanujam, Professor A.K. Ramanujam. And I appreciate your interest shown in Sangam literature. And Sangam literature has given prominent importance not only for the prominent importance on the economic aspect of fishing, but it is also given a very lengthy discussion about salt production, salt manufacturing, and salt, fish, and pearl are most important products discussed in Sangam literature in various occasions, in various anthologies. And Sangam also describe the landscape. It is actually a landscape poetry. It classifies the landscape into different landscape, 5 landscapes. So the hill landscape is described as Kurunji, and the forestal landscape as Mullai, agrarian tract is as Marudam, and the coastal landscape as the littoral landscape as Neidal. The Neidal is actually coastal and littoral landscape. And Pala is just as a kind of land deteriorated due to climate or weather change during the peak hot days. And in terms of the conservation value given by local people in the Gulf of Mannar, as per your second observation, that most of the mostly in modern days, after 1950s, people also given importance for travelers, but at the same time, small scale fishing, and I think we can say small scale fishing instead of artisanal fishing, because most of the artisanal fishing crafts were converted into other crafts with modern equipments and nylon nets and small motor equipment. So these small scale fishermen, mostly they are also adopting conservation practices during their fishing practice. And particularly in the Gulf of Mannar, we have witnessed that women, particularly around women from 25 villages in the Gulf of Mannar coast, practice the collection and harvest of seaweeds. So in certain periods, they also practice a kind of nature-friendly harvest of seaweeds. So this kind of practices, local practices, also should be included in the conservation measures supported by the state. And the local knowledge is not considered as scientific. So though the scientists who are coming from universities and research institutes suggest what they know as scientific knowledge. But there are also conflicting reports from different research and government institutions. For example, sea cucumber is banned by Wildlife Act, and also it is also listed in the sites list in Gulf of Mannar. But the report from CMFRI doesn't suggest for banning of sea cucumber harvest. So they have scientific evidence that sea cucumber population is not declining fast, and it is not an endangered species itself, so that it can be, the people can be allowed to harvest sea cucumber in a regulated manner. So this is the kind of conservation knowledge the scientific community is promoting in the name of conservation. So in short, I think the local practices of conservation and indigenous knowledge of nature conservation should be included in the conservation practices.
This 2013 or 12-13 disaster came in Uttarakhand. They said that disaster or these kind of natural calamities were part of their life. The point is not to stop the disaster. Point is not to stop the calamities, but to stop the disaster. And there is a need to understand that dealing between these two things. Similarly, the point here is not to stop that process of change in the nature. Rather, it's to recognize the right of the community who are living in the nature to lead that process, because they have been doing that for centuries. How come it's a colonial understanding that state or any other outside agency will come up and then stop that process of change. So this is one point that I loved. And I'm sorry for this long, because I have a reference from Bihar also. Kabar Lake, which is in the Begusarai districts of Bihar, is believed to be the one of the largest sweet water lake in Asia, and it has reduced to quarter of its size in last 30 years. Now the question from that lake is coming to me is that because we were talking about the politics, the movement to conserve by the communities who are living in that region. What happened in that lake is that it was not state or not either. It was not either the private venture or not the state who came up and then sort of did that primitive accumulation or encroached upon that land. It was the private army, because 90 was the also period in Bihar when private army of upper caste, landed elites, rampant, they butchered. So they butchered also these kind of lakes also, where they, got a position over these lakes. They destroyed this lake completely, and that was primary. Their primary objective was to capture that land. So one question is how you are looking at these processes of capturing beyond the question, beyond the institution of state and private actors, so the private companies, or that primitive accumulation point of view. And I might be this is third and last point. I might be reductionist in saying this, and you may also feel that I am pro capitalist or pro interest. I am speaking in the interest of capitalist class, but this is coming from me, my understanding of permanent settlement or the landlord system that was there in colonial India in 19th century and 20th century, is that when British transferred the land or the land right to collect resources from the land to a landlord community for certain period of time, short period of time, it appeared that because the landlord lost the interest to develop that land in the long term, they started exploiting the land in a unsustainable manner. So this person, Cornwallis, who was Viceroy of India, he came with the idea of giving permanent settlement for more than 30 years, so that a landlord will have interest to not exploit the land for in an unsustainable manner. So is it? And this is very reductionist. I may sound very reductionist and talking in the interest of capitalist class. Is that, do you think that giving permanent position to these capitalists or these big fishing ventures for 30 years, for 20 years or 30 years may somehow convince them to exploit the fishing fishes in a sustainable manner? That is like, I may sound reductionist and pro-capitalist, pro sort of thing, but this is how I am trying to problematize, understand from the different lenses. Thank you very much for this, both the speakers, for these wonderful talks.
Would OG Manimohan sir or Salam sir, would you like to add any comments to Sanjeev's observation? Or
Yeah, I think, yeah, it is an interesting observation. um, Actually, the British transferred the land right to the, whether it is a permanent settlement or it is permanent. I think the Cornwallis approach is permanent settlement.
Yeah.
And in the south, mostly, it is a Raitwari settlement and promoted by Monroe in Madras presidency, and also they spread across all of India in later times. Their idea is, I think it is, their idea is not to conserve the land by giving property right to, that is private property rights. And the basic idea of giving property right, private property right in land is that to increase their revenue collection. You can also see the annexation of forest in the name of conservation. But how did they define forest land? Evergreen forest lands were defined as waste. In order to give up to create rubber estate, tea plantations, and coffee estates, commercial estates. Everywhere you can see rubber estates in um, Malaysia, tea plantations in Sri Lanka, and parts of our Indian forest. So, as a consequence, converting the forest prime and evergreen forest land as wastelands, and they had given at cheaper rates to the plantation companies for commercial purposes. But there are a lot of stories. People used it as a economic resource for so many things. That is the thing. There are a lot of debate in the forest discussions. And my point is that even as you rightly suggested that the current idea of conservation as colonial legacy, and we continue to glorify the legacy. I don't think it has conservation priorities. Private people still argue that private property rights on natural resources and land incentivize nature conservation. I don't think so. In most of, for example, our rivers, water bodies, and other natural resources are polluted by whom? Private industrialists, without considering any role that resource played for natural played in the natural ecosystem and people's livelihood. Instead of thinking giving private property right to natural resources, particularly sea or forest or other land resources, I think we can also think about alternative property systems. Private property is not the only system. We have the human society evolved so many institutions of property. And we can also think about some stewardship, or I don't know whether we can suggest kind of trusteeship as suggested by Gandhi. We can think about it. We can think about it. We need not take the whole idea of trusteeship as such, but we can think about it, and we can also think about stewardship as part of property right definition. Thank you.
Since this topic has come up, I would just like to add a comment that a lot of forests, especially in the northeast, like in Darjeeling area, Sikkim area, and in fact the whole of Nagaland, most of the forests are owned by communities. So even like the forest, there are forest lands which are partly owned by the forest department, and some of the forests, they are owned by the communities. So the conservation laws or regulations, they do not apply to the community-owned forests. So when we go to field for surveys or in those areas, it's really difficult if we to implement the laws of maybe even say hunting in those community owned forests, because there no state law applies. It belongs to the community, and it's whatever extraction or use of the forest they want, they can do it in their own way. So that is something which I am not able to apprehend very well. Whether that's a good thing to practice or I mean, I have no comment or no opinion on that, but yeah, that is something which is there. So maybe somebody can share their experience on this.
Yeah, actually, this forest conservation. If I have if I can take 1-2 minutes, I was working in Harda in Madhya Pradesh, and two forest conservation model that I heard of often is one is Uttarakhand model, and then second one is the Chipko movement, and then this Harda model. What I felt the problematic of these kind of movement and these kind of project is that Harda model was, and I studied Harda model very closely. Harda model, was developed in a particular context. But the moment it got so much success, the state came into and they said, okay, this is the model. This is the model we need to follow all across it. And suddenly, Jharkhand government, Madhya Pradesh government, Maharashtra government came together and they said, okay, let's make this model, a model which will be applied to all across the state. And this is something that is problematic because a model developed in a particular context. So every single region needs to develop their own model instead of imposing. And that's what happened to Uttarakhand model also, that we romanticized a model to the extent that it lost its essence in the very beginning itself. So that was just a short comment that I wanted to make.